Welcome to the Friends of Dan Music Podcast. I'm Dan Miles. You've been listening to the music of Henderson, Berlin, and Chambers, an all-star trio featuring guitar virtuoso Scott Henderson, drum virtuoso Dennis Chambers, and bass virtuoso Jeff Berlin. That track can be found on their HBC CD, which they released in 2012. In addition to that album, we'll also be spotlighting Jeff Berlin's 2013 solo album, Low Standards, whose title is a callback to his earlier solo album, High Standards. The albums are quite different from each other in both their sound and their approach, but they're equally excellent in their own rights. Last time Jeff was on the show, both projects were well underway, but neither had been released yet. I told him once they were out, I'd love to have him come back again to talk about them, and he kindly agreed to do so. So let's get the master on the line. Joining me on the phone from Clearwater, Florida, is Jeff Berlin. Welcome back.
Hey, Danny. How are you, man?
I'm good. I'll explain to the audience you have a slight cold, and then you won't have to say it yourself. Well, before we get into the music, I want to congratulate you on the event of August 30th, 2013, which is a date I'll always remember because it was my son Jackson's 3rd birthday. Can you still remember what happened on that day?
Sure. That's the day I first got cable TV. I'm very excited about it.
Well, we set the tone for this one. Congratulations on getting married.
That's right. I got married to Gabriella, a lady from Argentina that I've known for a while. We're very happy. She's a wonderful singer, a wonderful music teacher, and coincidentally sort of has a coincidental view of the academic approach to teaching. When she teaches the students, she makes them work on the instrument. So that was an interesting kind of coincidence. I didn't know that was going to be her philosophy. But great. Yeah, I'm very happy.
All right, well, as for the music, let's start with the HBC album. Scott Henderson is one of those guys whose playing I knew before I knew his name. I heard the work he did with Jean-Luc Ponty and Chick Corea, and then later I discovered his own excellent band, Tribal Tech. And I know you've recorded with him as far back as your Champion album in the 80s, so I'm wondering how your paths crossed initially.
He was a student at MI. I was a teacher at MI, and I actually remember him walking in and saying, "Hi, I'm Scott. I'm a guitar player, and looking for a guitar player. I'd like to play for you." And I went down and saw him play, and I said, "My gosh, this is what a talent! I mean, what a great guitarist!" So I had just gotten a deal to do my very first solo record, and I invited Scott to play on it. And since then, Scott and I have sort of been like-minded in regards to our dedication to music and the raising up of it. We're both believers in practice. We're both believers in learning new things. And that's just a coincidence as well. I noticed that people that I have in my life share a philosophy of things that seem to match mine. That's an awfully nice thing for me. And so when HBC was formed, it wasn't with the H. It was, I think, we were looking at other guitarists, Dennis and I said, well, wait a minute, Scott is just the guy, man. Mm-hmm. So I called up Scott and asked him if he'd play, and he, of course, is a huge fan of Dennis, like me. And he said yes, and we've been playing together now 5 years as a trio.
So you recorded with them on your first solo album. Until HBC, did you do any other recording with them or just live gigs?
No, I never did any other recording with him. Total we've done is 2 records. He was into his band Tribal Tech, and I was retired from music as I stayed home because my son had cancer. It's kind of a known story, people that know me.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of touring or playing, I principally just put my bass away so that I could be with my son. And I spent most of those years in the house, and he slowly recovered, and things got better and better, and I resumed my career. So when this came along, it was a very good opportunity for me to record again with Scotty, and we latched onto this, and we recorded it. And we're talking now about another record as well.
Good, because I have to tell you, when I first put this one on, it's an overused phrase to say blown away, but I was like going, this is good. Yeah, one of my favorite things that he's done, because it's interesting you say you were a teacher and he was a student, and then when you were sort of taking a break, he was progressing, he sort of became peers and everything.
Yes.
One of my favorite things that he's done is that album, Dog Party. It's like a heavy blues album along the lines of Stevie Ray Vaughan, where all the songs are about dogs. You know?
Well, Scott loves Stevie Ray Vaughan. He loves Jeff Beck. He's a student of guitar, so he learned from these guys.
Well, I'm just saying.
He learned from Schofield. Oh, you're saying about this record?
No, I'm just saying if you know him from Tribal Tech, and then you get Dog Party, it's like
Right.
you wouldn't necessarily. It just sounds like a really good aggressive blues player. So in addition to featuring a lot of great playing, it's a funny album. There's a lot of comedy and entertainment value to it. So it's kind of an aberration. It even says in the liner notes, an aberration from his usual thing. It's just an idea he had. But it's just one of my favorite things he's done because, it's just a funny idea. And as far as Dennis Chambers, I mean, what a resume that guy has. And he's worked with Parliament Funkadelic, George Duke, John McLaughlin, Santana, Bill Evans, Brecker Brothers, Maceo Parker, among many others. I first became aware of him back in the 90s when I saw him performing with Steely Dan. I was in the audience for that version of Josie that ended up on their Alive in America album where he does his killer drum solo. So how did you first hook up with Dennis?
Dennis was a fan of the Bill Bruford band that I played in.
Yeah.
We had never played. Frankly, we had never talked. I'm not sure. We've just never hooked up. Dennis is a shy fellow, surprisingly, for the extremely extroverted drumming that he does.
Yeah.
And when this little opportunity came along, is when we met and introduced and became friends. And we're more than friends now.
Yeah.
Hanging with somebody, when you play regularly with them and you're on the road, it's akin to a marriage.
Yeah.
You do things with your friends. You do everything with them except. You follow?
Yeah, I do.
So we're up in the morning. We're in the van. We're hanging out. We're at the airport. We're in the plane. We're off the plane. We're in the van. We're at the sound check. We do the gig. We do the hang afterwards. We drive back. Then we go to our rooms and we're away from each other for a few hours before we do it again.
Yeah.
And that kind of interaction can break up a band or make the ties stronger.
Yeah.
And that's what happened, Dennis and I. And Dennis was always, I would call him he was so polyrhythmically astonishing that it took me a couple of years to figure out how to play with him because his thing was so on and off and off and on and in and out and out and in of the downbeat that I thought that I was supposed to hear it that way, and I would end up a mile away from him. Then he instructed me, don't listen to me, just count it yourself. And as soon as I started doing that, it was an instantaneous match between us.
Yeah.
And it was the only suggestion he ever gave me because as a rhythm section, we were always tight. And I'm a better bass player because of him. There's just no doubt about it.
Yeah. Well, listening to you guys play together, there's no indication of any, in fact, some of the stuff is, I would imagine would be difficult to play tight. And we'll talk about that as it goes along. So
Sure.
The formation of HBC, it wasn't a Scott Henderson-driven thing. It was originally you and Dennis looking for a third musician. So, were you offered a recording contract? Is that how or was it just, how did the opportunity arise?
I have an agent named Alejandro Orellana who has booked me all over the world and said, if you hook up with two other named guys, you guys do way better business.
Yeah.
And maybe have musical fun doing it. And it was his initiation, because I was sort of content to do my little jazz thing, and also in case people started to call me, people were calling me again, once I got back into music. after my son got better, I took his suggestion and we started to plan it and do it, and that's how that came about. It was literally his inspiration, and I ran with it. It was a very good idea on his part.
Yeah, well, good. Well, your agent was very intuitive because I know that you guys had fun recording, and I know that the audience and yourself have fun at the live gig, so it was a inspired idea. And it'd be one thing if you had to do this and it was all you were allowed to do, but if you can return to this and do your other things, then it's a great arrangement.
Sure. Absolutely.
There are a lot of familiar titles on the album. How did you go about selecting the material?
Scott is a guy that doesn't like to do much beyond his area of interest. And in that regard, he'll stay in that area and do everything he can. I don't know if that makes sense. If I propose certain things, or Dennis did, that Scott's sort of a guy who goes, well, no, I don't want to do that.
Huh.
And all right, that's what it is. So he came up with a bunch of Weather Report. He's a huge Weather Report fan. And he had come up with a bunch of music that he had learned, and Herbie music, I think, that he played in Tribal Tech. And we said, okay, let's do it. And he came up with this and then did like lots of guitars. I mean, I did the whole album in one day.
Right, I know.
I did it in one day, and I'm kind of proud of that. We'd already been playing, so we went in and recorded. Dennis recorded, I recorded, fixed a couple of stupidities on my part. And that was it. And Scott took the record, and I think he had it for about 3 weeks because he was layering and layering and adding and adding and layering and layering. So, and he would do that because he was interested in this music that he was such a fan of. So, frankly, my one day, I'm pleased with it. I mean, you hear things, I wish I did that better. The tone's a little too nasal. I should have had more bottom, I don't know, this and that. I did a little bass solo, which I did in Clearwater, actually. I wrote a piece, and Scott came up with a blues or two. Yeah. And it was basically the material on Henderson interest.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why it kind of seems like a Henderson-driven thing, because after he became involved, that's good material for you guys to sink your teeth into, though, so it's good choices. I'm sure you were influenced by that material as well. Let's go ahead and play a track from the album. This isn't a Weather Report track. It's the HBC version of Billy Cobham's Stratus, which features some characteristic powerhouse drumming from Dennis Chambers. Scott Henderson's doing double duty, covering both the guitar and the keyboard parts, by which I mean...
There is no keyboard.
But what I mean, on the original recording of Stratus, there was, and he's covering that on his guitar.
On his guitar,
right.
Exactly.
And you're doing the endurance test with that driving bass line. It's interesting how Scott set his delay at a louder volume than his initial note. It creates the effect that the initial attack is the echo, which I find pretty cool. Let's check it out. From the 2012 HBC album, here are Henderson, Berlin, and Chambers with their take on Billy Cobham's Stratus. Well, that's some pretty powerful playing by all concerned. It must be quite a rush for each of you hearing the other two play in this massive collective sound that you're producing. You know, if I was Dennis and then you're playing bass and Scott's playing guitar, and if I'm Scott and you guys are the rhythm section, and if I'm you and here's Scott and Dennis, for yourselves, it must be pretty entertaining just to be around these other great players.
It is. In fact, I've equated our group as a kind of a jazz or a fusion, or, you know, we're a rock group. We're fairly eclectic version of Cream.
Yeah.
If we had come along in the late 60s, we would have been playing through Marshall stacks.
Yeah.
And Cream was the epitome of the greatest playing band out of rock, even though Ginger didn't like rock that much, that came out of the 60s, because it was a top-level guitar player, a top-level bassist, and a top-level drummer. And they were all playing at their kind of firebrand abilities. You know, their top-level ability to, I don't know, hit that belt, man. They wanted to do it. And to this day, those Cream albums still sound fresh because of it. I kind of equate us like that, too. I'm 61. But I play like I'm 60. I play like I'm a younger man. You know, we play hard. I mean, we do not mess around. We do not come to the gig tired. We don't come to the gig light in attitude. We come, we're ready to play. We want each other to like each other's playing.
Yeah.
So we're kind of we put ourselves a little bit under the gun, and we have fun with it. It's honestly a fun environment. We are what we are, and we hit hard, man. We do not take prisoners, and I'm very proud of that. That at my age I could find a band in that particular regard, where it's that exciting, because other gigs I'll do require another approach, and I'm happy with that. So this is sort of my little kind of moment to go to the edge of the cliff, try to jump and not get hurt, and it's really musically exciting to me.
It reminds me of, when an actor is in a movie or a TV show and the other actors are really good, they know they have to show up for work a little more. The game is raised because you don't want to be in a scene with somebody who's really great and you're not carrying your weight. So, because a lot of times guys like you're like the band leader, or you're carrying the people there to see you, and then it's supporting people. But in this one, you're sort of all of equal abilities, and you better not be slacking. Well, ironically, now talking about the big energy level, I'm going to play something from the album that's much mellower, mainly because it's a showcase for you. It's a track that's called "The Orphan."
Right.
And another one, it sounds like it has tons of keyboards on it, but it's Scott Henderson's guitar effects. And
Yes.
what do you want to say about "The Orphan" before I play it?
It's a Joe Zawinul improvised tune. Joe never wrote music; he improvised it. Birdland is improvised. Things are improvised. He would cut things together. He would jam and write out his jams, and they became songs. The Orphan is one of the most breathtaking pieces I think I ever heard come from Joe Zawinul. And it's on an album called 830, a Weather Report record. And it's Joe on keyboards and Wayne Shorter on soprano.
Mm-hmm.
That's the piece. It, to this day, it stuns me. Our version pales in comparison to the original Joe Zawinul heartbreaking, stunning, sonic, synthesized, motivated piece. It's just brilliant. And what happened is Wayne Shorter played a few improvised lines that I learned, wrote out, imitated, and tried to duplicate with very, very poor success. I'm going to tell you straight. I played this, I did my Wayne imitation, but how? How is it possible for an electric bass to imitate the whine and the heart and the emotion that Wayne could put into a soprano? But I said, you know what? I'll give it my college try, and that's what this piece is. And you're hearing da 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 ba da ba da ba 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 da ba da 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 da. These are Wayne Shorter improvised lines, and I imitated them. I even imitated the pauses. Meaning, I imitated. Wayne is always behind the beat on this. I imitated that. So as a exercise in imitation, I did a good job.
Well, all of us are far less critical about it. I like the track, but what about the hand claps and the sort of voice effect at the end? Was that different, or was that also a Weather Report thing as well?
That's right off the tune. Okay. I think Scott's daughter clapped and sang that. He orchestrated, told her what to do. So that is right off the track. I think the tune is called "The Orphan" because Joe Zawinul went into the studio and had an orphan home invited the children at the orphan home to sing on the track.
Ah.
And even at the beginning of the original Joe Zawinul track, Joe always added things that are unpredictable. And you'll hear on the track, as the keyboards begin, you hear children talking in the background, whispering, shh, shh, they might hear you, shh, shh,
right.
Like this. Because they were in the studio, Joe was recording them. And he put that little few words and children talking on the track.
Yeah.
Actually touching, just touching.
Yeah, well, I had never heard the original version you're talking about. I only heard this one. So it might pale in your mind, but in my mind, it's pretty outstanding. And it definitely has a mood and a vibe to it. And now that you've set the context for it, it'll be that much more interesting to listen to. So let's pause and check that one out from the HBC album. Here is "The Orphan."